Hello, so today we're going to be going over patch 16.3. This is the upcoming patch for TFT that's going to come out a little bit later this week. And we're going to talk about some of the changes and what I think some of the impacts are going to be to the game as it stands right now. If you like this content, first of all, I'm going to be reacting to the presentation that Morkdog did on his channel. So this is going to be my interpretation of this. If you want to see the original video and his interpretation and explanations as a Riot dev, you can check out his channel. I support this. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll link it as well in the video. But of course, I usually do guide style content. I'm just doing these because I'm trying to give like a nice update to those who get their TFT content from me, just to like give my take and my overview and my reaction to what the changes are going to be. So let's go through it now. Let's talk about system changes. So one of the big ones, they're making it harder to get to level 9. So instead of getting to, this is like the change to get to level 8 to level 9, instead of it taking 68 XP, it's going to be 76 XP, which is basically plus 8 gold that you're going to need in order to spend in order to get to that level 9. This is kind of helps to slow down the pace of just like, everybody just rushing 9 or teleporting to 5 costs and all of that. It helps you play the mid game a little bit more, which is playing around your 4 costs. To me, this isn't the most crazy change, right? I think if you are more of a veteran TFT player that you play a lot and you like really enjoy playing around like those level 8 boards, a lot of times the decision to go 9 is a sometimes food anyways, that you have to kind of decide if you're able to make it there or not based on what your spot is in the game. This will be way more punishing, however, if like other people are able to make it to 9 and you're not now, and just know that you're gonna have to play and be a lot more comfortable on level 8. You won't be able to skip that step. You won't be able to more easily just like, play 8 Yordle and teleport to 9, or play Bard and teleport to 9, or get an Econ Augment and teleport to 9. You're gonna have to play a little bit more on level 8. I think generally it's a good change. I felt like it's a little bit hard, like they made it harder to get to level 8, but then they made it like this gap from level 8 to level 9 a little bit easier. I felt like, if you want to force players to play at a lower level, I would like a change like this. So this is fine. I don't think this is a big issue, but just note it might change the way that you approach certain comps, and it might also make certain comps a little bit harder to play. Something like a Rise board, for example, will be a little bit more challenging. Anyways, encounters. For Gwen's gift, they disabled crafted crafting. If you didn't know, crafted craftings, it's silver augment that gives you a reroll every time you make an item. So there was like this, I don't know if it's like bug abuse, but it was like, obviously an exploit where if you got crafted craftings with Gwen gifts, that splits up your items, so you get like a bunch of extra rerolls, and it makes the silver augment completely broken in that encounter. So that's why that's getting removed. It's not like a major bug. It's just because like there was a synergy there that made it really broken. And then Emblem Ensemble, they're disabling Coronation, Cursed Crown, Flexible, Legion of Threes, Tactician's Kitchen, Earth. I think it's just to decrease the chances of hitting those like Giga win-out conditions, because that obviously is something that happens, especially with Emblem Ensemble. So things where it gives you like these extra spots on your board where you can make it to like those 10 traits really easily, or things that like really power up your units, so you have like these broken synergies. So now like the emblems that you get, you kind of have to play around them a little bit more. I don't know if this is particularly incredible, like, but it's just like the way it is. Like, I think it's fine. It makes sense. Next we have auras. So Shyvana, Skarner, Taric, they're called like auras. It's basically like they have a passive where it gives units like an extra benefit, right? If you think about Taric, for example, like his aura is the passive, right? All allies gain magic resist, right? And then Skarner has armor, and then Shyvana has that you take less damage from abilities, right? So they have like these team-wide buffs is usually what I like to call them. But basically, their auras will now persist if the champion dies. Before, when the champion would die, those benefits would lose. This is a huge buff to boards that play Shyvana, Skarner, Taric. If you're playing flexibly, I always mention these are great units that give team-wide buffs you just want to put on your board, because they'll just strengthen your board by some means, right? Especially Shyvana, I say she's really good for high cap boards because she just provides a team-wide benefit, so you can't go wrong. Even if she's 0 synergy, she helps out your whole team. Making it so now that they persist even after the champion does. I already felt like these 3 units were very common to just slot into your board and be really powerful. Just note they're going to be even more powerful, because now even if they're 1-star, they're still going to give that benefit because it persists if they die, or that like that's a buff that makes them a lot better, and I already felt like they were really strong. Next, we have unlockable 4 and 5 cost rules. So basically, if you didn't know, with 4 and 5 costs specifically, if a lot of them were removed from the pool, it made it harder to find certain copies of them. It made it really awkward if you were playing a unlock unit as like if you were contesting an unlock unit because, you know, after I think it was like 4 units or something out of the pool, then the odds of it would like artificially get increased by some undisclosed amount to make it harder to do. And the same thing for 3 stars, right? If you're trying to find all of the 3 stars, there was like some scaling aspect of it that made it harder to hit those units. Now still, it was still pretty easy to hit the 3 stars, so now they're adjusting the odds to make it harder to hit the 3-star version. So this is like, you know, somebody unlocks Fizz, nobody has Fizz unlocked, you can't contest it, and then somebody just has Fizz 3 randomly, right? Stuff like that can happen in some games. This is to make that a little bit less common. Now, to compensate as well, you're making that harder to do. You don't want to make it harder to just like hit everything, because, you know, when you're contested you can't hit the units. It was kind of like artificially harder to hit the units if you were contested, which made it a little bit awkward. They're making it to be slightly easier to get the 2-star unlocks, so it's easier to find those first couple copies. So if you're playing the same unlock unit as someone else, like I said, this is only for 4 and 5 costs, right? It was just like because there's like a win condition with 3 stars, so there was like this scaling aspect. This is to make it a little bit easier. And then tutorial mode, armories last now indefinitely. Okay, cool. But in terms of major changes, the main thing you should know is just in general, level 9 can be harder to achieve, so be prepared to play more towards your level 8 boards. That's going to be probably a little bit more apparent on the next patch. And then additionally, the main one I think is like Shyvana, Skarner, Taric. I think they're already really good units. If they don't have any buffs, or sorry, if they don't have any nerfs to compensate for this, I think that they're already extremely good slot-in units. Just always keep those in your mind of units you can potentially slot in onto your board. Now, unlock changes. So if you didn't know, there was like a huge patch that lasted like a month. That was like around December, and basically Riot, they were on like break, so they couldn't like do these changes. And then there's localization changes, so unlock changes basically couldn't happen until this patch. So this patch, we expect to see some unlock changes to make certain things a little bit easier, certain things maybe a little bit more comfortable, in terms of like some of the outlier unlocks that are a little bit awkward or clumsy. So the ones that we're going to see them addressing first, Viego, instead of 2 items, it's 1 item. I think this just makes Shadow Isles a little bit more approachable. I don't particularly like this change. I kind of like the idea of Shadow Isles. It's fine, right? This is not a thing. I just like when Shadow Isles exists, because right now Shadow Isles I think is an okay spot to play as a tempo line that you can pretty reliably get like a top 4-ish area. Like, it's not like super strong high cap, but then obviously if you high roll, it could be really high cap. So I feel like Shadow Isles is starting to get to like a good spot. I don't really like it when the unlock units like these, because it kind of means like you can contest it more easily. That's what I mean to say. Before with this, it was like, okay, I have a Viego, I have 2 items, nobody else has this spot, I can play around Shadow Isles and I know that I'm kind of safe from like that. I think that was like one of the aspects of Shadow Isles. But I think this is just easier if you want to play Shadow Isles more often, right? It does make the comp more accessible, which I think overall is a good thing, right? For me, it's like, oh man, now people are going to play Shadow Isles, and I kind of enjoyed playing it. But now it's like, you know, it makes it more accessible, which makes it easier to play in general. So there's another comp to play. So it's definitely a good change, right? I want to make that very clear. It's a very good change. I don't want people to misinterpret what I was saying. It's a good change. It's very good. So it makes Shadow Isles more easier to play. Orianna, similarly, instead of having 3 Piltover units, now 2 items on a Piltover champion. It makes it like a little bit easier to get that in and have some synergies work if you want to play Orianna with some Piltover boards, because she is pretty nice, especially with the Invoker synergy, but she's a little bit awkward to unlock because you needed to find a Loris in order to have the 3 Piltover just to get the Orianna. Now you can get her a little bit easier by just having the items condition. Tryndamere, same thing with like Viego, right? If you want to play around Tryndamere now, 1 item makes it a little bit more accessible, right? 1 item even counts like with 1 component, so like basically from any opener now, you can play around Viego Tryndamere, right? There was stuff where it was like a little bit awkward, where like you would have a really good spot for a unit like this, then you wouldn't be able to unlock them because you wouldn't have the necessary conditions to do so. But also these units are a little bit weaker and need like a little bit more like, you know, things to get going, if that makes sense. So now it's a little bit better, at least right now. Kai'Sa, this is a big one. They're changing Kai'Sa's unlock from level 8 to level 7. I expect to see some Kai'Sa nerfs to compensate for this, because this is a really massive change. One of the things with Kai'Sa that everybody basically complained about is that you had to unlock her on level 8. So a lot of times you want to roll on level 8 to find the Kai'Sa. So what you would have to do is you have to kind of stutter step. You'd have to level to 8, then you'd have to wait a turn, and then you'd have to roll, because you wouldn't have Kai'Sa unlocked, so you wouldn't start rolling. And it was like really awkward, and it made Void lines a little bit it wasn't like a big problem, like Void was still fine, but it made it a little bit awkward. Making it now level 7, Void is going to be a very strong and reliable mid-game kind of board, because you have to understand, level 7, a lot of times you can hit that on like 3-5 or even like 3-7. Like you can hit it on stage 3. On stage 3, you also get Rift Herald, right? Now, Void is already in a decent spot just to play for like a reliable top 4. It obviously has win conditions associated with it with Baron. If we don't see any Ziggs nerfs as well, then it has really good win conditions on level 9 just playing long shot Ziggs. But the fact that you get a Rift Herald, now you can basically get a Rift Herald and a Kai'Sa, and you can have a full Void board on stage 3 before you even do your stage 4 roll down on level 8, because the unlock, you'll just get it in your shop. This is a massive buff, so I expect to see something compensated with Kai'Sa, because right now she does do a decent amount of damage, maybe like a 1-star Giga nerf on her or something. We'll see later in the presentation, but just know that that is a massive buff to Void, in my opinion at least, because it's already a very tempo based line. Now you just really can tempo with it. Next we have Warwick. Warwick, I felt was a little bit of a pain to unlock, and he was never really worth it on a lot of boards. I don't want to talk too much about Warwick, because every time I shit talk Warwick or Jinx, I get a slew of comments saying that I don't know what I'm talking about. So you guys just play it if you want. I'm not even going to try and convince you guys otherwise. It's your LP, have fun. But now he's easier to unlock, so maybe that's going to make the board a little bit more consistent. Have fun, Warwick enjoyers. Next, let's go through traits. So one of the big traits that I think is kind of annoying to a lot of people right now is Bilgewater. Bilgewater, you know, it's really overbearing. It has a lot of different flexible options because it gives you a lot of resource and a lot of tempo. So I expect to see that getting cut down by quite a bit. So they're cutting down the first free AD AP down a bit. And then they're making the 2-cost Serpents shops or a little bit less. So this is like the buying Graves, buying Twisted Fate. A lot of times you could just like naturally get like a Twisted Fate 3, and I think that's like a viable strategy in certain cases on the patch, where it makes it really makes you have a really strong mid game into late game that you can just tempo and level. The big nerf I see to Bilgewater here is Serpents per takedown. So if you didn't know, every takedown you would get 2 Serpents, and with Bilgewater you would get a base amount of Serpents based on if you're 3, 5, or 7 Bilgewater. This is what you use to buy a lot of the units in your shop, buy the items, buy the stats bonuses. It's now basically cut in half. Now you're still going to get the base Serpents, by the way, so of course like they're not cutting, you know, if we look at the Bilgewater trait, right, if you're playing 7 Bilgewater for example, you still get 65 Serpents, but within a round you're not going to gain the 2 Serpents per takedown as well. That's pretty massive because it's going to hurt a lot of how you can scale the board into late game. A lot of times with Bilgewater, you're trying to get, by some means necessary, to 7 Bilgewater, garnish a bunch of Serpents, hopefully buy some of the high tier Bilgewater items, and then you want to eventually transition down to like, you know, 5 or 3 Bilgewater, cap out with legendaries, and then buy a bunch of stats or items and just cap your board with a lot of those resources. This cuts a lot of the resource generation, and it also can hurt the tempo of the resource generation, because Serpents dropping from 1 to 2, you know, in one turn you won't be able to easily get a Serpent upgrade, so it's going to hurt the tempo pacing of it. Now, I don't know if this is going to make Bilgewater bad. This nerf is very hard to tell, because Bilgewater, it is really flexible, and every time it gets nerfed, there's always like some way of like playing around it and making things work out that it's like still okay. That's why it's been repeatedly nerfed, but it's always like compensated in some way. If there's no compensation for this, it's hard to say how much of a hit this is to Bilgewater. It's definitely a massive hit, so Bilgewater won't be the #1 comp next patch. That's pretty obvious. It'll be somewhere in the same power level as some of the other comps. I just don't know if it's going to be bad. The reason I say that is because if you imagine like a 3 or 5 Bilgewater, right? 3 Bilgewater, you get 15 per shop. 5 Bilgewater, you get 35 per shop. A big part of what made Bilgewater great is because with the tempo that you would have, you would be able to, within a round, let's say you kill 6 units, you get 12 Serpents. If you kill 7 units, you get like 14 Serpents, right? Those extra additional Serpents on the takedown would push these thresholds to that you can afford something in your shop, because the things in your shop, they cost either 30 or 60 if it's a low tier item, or 50 if it's one of the 3 cost units, or 75 if it's an MF. If you're unable to like get the shops, like buying stuff from your shop every single round, or buying stuff from your shop in your mid game in order to win rounds in tempo, you can lose a lot of the tempo that you have with Bilgewater. That makes it hard to greed on 7 and hard to reach those major cash outs. So that's what I mean. It might be a massive hit, because cutting that in half, I can already see like there's going to be rounds where, oh, it would be nice if I can buy this item or this stat bonus and have to wait like an extra turn. So it like slows down the whole engine, which could make it like, so that's what I'm saying, right? A lot of people, like I said, aren't big Bilgewater enjoyers, so I'm saying there's hope that it will be a lot more in line with some of the other comps, but at the same time, it could be, it's hard to say. We have to just see how much that affects things because of how overbearing it is right now in the current state of the game. Darken, 3-piece damage getting increased by like basically 300%. right? From 100 to 333. 3 Darken felt really shit in my opinion, and it's also very situational because it deals with like healing. So a lot of times if the units were full health, it kind of didn't proc and there was very little damage that it gave. So I think this is just to make it like, you know, more of like a, wow, I hit 3 Darken that requires me to have these special artifacts and an Aatrox or a Zehen and these units and blah blah blah. Now it might be like a little bit more worth it. I'm still skeptical because it was so abysmal before, so I don't know for sure. Piltover. So adjusting some of the weaker Piltover options. So Continuum Cogs giving more AP, Acceleration Gate giving more of the mana restore, right? And then Magnetron Coil a little bit lower, and then the armor nullification, tank, and attack speed. I feel like Piltover's in a little bit of a precarious spot because of the T-Hex, right? T-Hex was really broken, then I got nerfed a lot. It's really bad on the current state of the game. So, you know, we'll see if there's compensation to some of the other Piltover units. But at least for 2 and 4 Piltover, this might make things a little bit more consistent if you're playing around like Seraphine as a carry with some boards, because that does show up quite a bit. But I just don't think the 6 Piltover is like as common, so these ones are a little bit hard to tell how impactful they are. Void, this one's actually a pretty major change for certain lines. I actually don't like this change, but basically it says always offers an offensive mutation first. So if you don't know, with Void, there's usually like there's offensive and defensive mutations, right? The offensive ones, they're all pretty solid, right? The only ones that aren't that great is usually like what's it called? Royal Husk, I think, is one of the worst ones. But the thing is, you really like to have a tank one earlier, because a lot of times if you're playing Void and you're trying to pivot out of Void, the tank ones were really good for just playing around Rift Herald with certain lines, right? There are lines where you play Rift Herald just into like a Seraphine Singed board, right? Like this is a very common board that you might end up with, something like this, right? And the thing with the Rift Herald is that a lot of times, like, the conditions for this comp was that you're playing only 2 Void, so you like to have the tank one earlier, right? If you have the tank one on 2 Void, then you can play these types of comps, which gave a level of flexibility to Void, where you don't have to lock into playing a Void unit as a carry. Now, what this does is I feel like this hurts the flexibility of Void, because this is just an example with like the Seraphine Singe comp, but this applied for like every comp, right? Every time you had a Void opener, you could just play Rift Herald and play a Bruiser front line and just drop down to 2 Void and carry like another board, and it helped with flexibility. I feel like this makes Void less flexible, and that's why I don't like it. But of course, an offensive mutation first obviously helps. A lot of times you want the offensive mutations because you can then have something nice for your carry, and then if you drop down, you don't have to worry about like the whole tank and everything else. This also makes Void, right? It might make Void more flexible in the sense that like you might not have to play around Rift Herald as the main tank as well, but that's like a separate issue. Like, you know, you can play 2 Void, like just a Kaisa and Kog'Maw, right? Like there's certain lines where, like, you know, for example, like Demacia, if you're playing like Demacia with Vayne, right? Like a high cap variation of Vayne is that you play 2 Void. Like these types of lines might benefit where like you don't want to tank one anyways, but like this wasn't like a huge optimization because usually you played around Ziggs anyways, so you didn't really care about playing Kog'Maw. It's like, oh, I have a offensive one, I'll play Kog'Maw, whatever, you know, it is what it is. I'm just explaining like my take on it and what things might change, so just keep in mind you can't get a defensive one first. Splitter Splines, this one's the most broken one of the Void mutations. It became the strong one over time. 100, it's just getting dropped by like 10%. I think it'll still be really strong. And then Royal Husk, this one's the weakest of the Void mutations in my opinion, getting buffed, so it makes sense, in tune with what you expect to see from the balancing. Next, we have a giant change to Ishtal. So I made an Ishtal guide a couple days ago, I think, like, or maybe a week ago. So this is going to change some of the cash outs and some of the quests, right? So some of the quests, like the rerolls, they're just getting a little bit of an adjustment. It all seems like buffs, right? So like a lot of these, they're like less rerolls or less interest gained. So it's going to be easier to cash out a lot of these, which makes them a lot more nice, right? These were already some of the better ones, the reroll options, in order to hit these Ishtal quests. So this is pretty nice. And then some of the other ones, right, a little bit of like an increase in how much rewards it gives you, just because they're maybe as more risky, so makes them a little bit more worth it, if that makes sense. In terms of cash outs, not much of a change because it's mostly just to the really high ones, right? The 700s, the 800s. A lot of times the really high cash outs with these traits can be like a little bit awkward or difficult to play around, and it can feel like, oh, I did this whole thing and then I got like a shitty cash out. So it makes sense just making them more supercharged and stronger. But usually if you're hitting these cash outs, you expect to win, so I don't care. Just buff it. That's fine. You know what I mean? Because if you made it this far, like at that point, it's kind of bad balance if the cash out is really bad and you just lose anyways. You want these to feel like really good wins, so I'm on board, but not gonna affect most games, so we don't have to dwell on it too much. All right, let's go through some champions now. So, one cost champions. Anivia, increase in attack speed. I feel like Anivia was a pretty good item holder early game, especially with like Sona and Demacia being good now. So this actually makes Anivia, in my opinion, being one of the better options here. Then we have Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank just getting a little bit of a mana reduction. I felt like Blitzcrank, a little bit hard to get the casts off, so helps that out a little bit. Briar. They keep buffing 3-star Briar and high cost Briars. I think they're trying to make like Briar like Slayer reroll maybe a thing, like even with the Kiana buffs we can see right adjacent. Maybe there's like a reroll line between these units, but you know, I wouldn't, seeing is believing for me with 1-cost units, because you don't want to like invest a lot in a low cost unit and then find out that it doesn't work that well. But these buffs are pretty massive, right? It is mostly to the attack speed, but it is a like, you know, almost a 20% buff, right? That's pretty massive. And then over here as well, right, 360 to 400, that's like 10%-ish, right? You have quite a bit of a increase over there. And these are also great early game units in my opinion. So if you have like a worth the wait, for example, that can help out quite a bit. This one's pretty massive though. Jhin, one of the main benefits of Jhin was that he scaled with attack speed, right? His ult scaled with attack speed. This is a massive nerf, right? It's not in red text, but I'm telling you guys now, this is pretty big of a nerf. Because usually when you would play Jhin, you would put him with like holding Yunara items or holding like AD items. So a lot of times he was really strong with attack speed. If you didn't give him a lot of attack speed, he was kind of like on par with a lot of the other 1 costs. Now his attack speed gets set to 1.0. So that means that if you don't give him any bow items, it's obviously going to be a buff, right? Because like if you give him just like an IE and no bow item, he's gonna his attack speed is going to be higher when he ults, so he's going to get his ult off, and it's just going to be like bang, 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 and he's going to shoot his bullets, and everything's great. But the thing is, Jhin was really good for stage 3, right? Stage 2, whatever. Stage 3, even though he was a 1 cost, he was extremely powerful, because if you gave him attack speed, right? If you gave him like a Kraken or a Guinsoo, his attack speed would rise well above this, and his ult scaled with it. He shot his shots faster with more attack speed. So in that sense, I really like to play around Jhin because I knew that if I invest towards Jhin, I can keep him on my board all the way up until stage 4 and sometimes even later than that, because I would have this huge interaction of how strong he was. Now, of course, this obviously puts him more on par with the other 1 costs, which is fine, right? I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just saying that he's definitely going to be a lot weaker because of this, especially if you were building him that way. If you weren't building him that way and you're just shoving like random sword items on him, then this might even feel like a buff, because obviously if you don't have any bow items, his attack speed is lower than this. You're not playing towards that interaction. It's different. But then also AD nerfs. I usually say 5 AD makes a unit good or broken, because this is base AD. This is 4. That's a pretty substantial nerf. And with the attack speed changes, he's really not going to do a lot of damage until his ult, in my opinion. And his ult does get a little bit of a buff here, but it's pretty small, right? If you look at it, it's like around like 10% or less on a lot of these. So it's not that big of a compensation buff. So I think overall Jhin nerf, in my opinion. Next, we have 2 costs. So 2 costs, Ashe getting buffed. I think Ashe was a little bit awkward. I think they're trying to like compensate and make the Tryndamere line a little bit more like okay to play around, because basically like they nerfed Tryndamere a bunch, broke his ankles, and then it was like completely bad. So I think with the unlock changes and maybe some buffs, we'll also see over here some Tryndamere buffs as well. They're not the largest of buffs, right? It's around 10% or less. It's not super massive, but I think just to make the line a little bit more of an option. It is pretty good with artifacts, in my opinion. So there are some artifact interactions that can make this line a little bit more reliable, but we'll see how it plays out. And then let's go to Echo. So Echo reducing the tankiness, so 5 less armor MR. This is pretty massive. It could make him die a little bit faster. Echo reroll, really popular on the current patch. I don't personally think it's that broken and strong. I think that with rerolls a lot of times, like, you know, if you're fighting unoptimized boards, or if, you know, having the game plan early and using the early game tempo could make it seem a lot stronger than it is if your lobby doesn't punish you accordingly. But in general, it is really powerful, is really strong, and it does have some win conditions as well if you play it with Ishtal, which I talked about in my Ishtal guide. But in general, just make him a little bit more squishy. So it might make him a little bit more dependent on some good items and some good augments, and positioning might matter because he might just like die being a frontline unit. Just be aware your Echo is going to be a little bit more squishy with that reroll line. Then we also have Orianna. This is a buff to mana, so basically what this means is that she's going to get her ult off a little bit faster. Orianna does have a pretty good ult. I feel like Orianna is like low-key pretty good, especially as a mid-game unit. She was just hard to unlock. So now that she's easier to unlock, you know, they changed her from just being items and stuff. She does do a decent chunk of change, right? She also applies like a shield. I don't think there's going to be necessarily Orianna reroll lines, but if there might be, is what I'm trying to say, right? Like already she's like really good if you're playing around Ishtal reroll, and now she's a little bit easier to unlock, so she can play more easily into those lines. But she has like a very similar like Sona-esque effect, right? Instead of healing, she does shielding, but she has really good AP scaling where she hits AoE and then also like does this shielding. Now, is her scaling the best? Not necessarily, but she has good synergies. Invoker and Piltover, two things that you really like to have on a board, so she might see a little bit more play, especially since she's a little bit easier to get on the field now. Now we have some champion 3 costs. So Draven, they nerfed him and buffed him, whatever. He got kind of like reworked a little bit. So 3 AD, pretty good. This makes, he's an auto attacker, so it definitely strengthens him up a little bit. Maybe Draven reroll and Noxus as a reroll line might be a little bit stronger. I think that was something people thought was going to be really good with all the Noxus buffs last patch. Turned out it wasn't. I tried it out a couple times as well. Definitely wasn't super ecstatic about its performance, but maybe now it will be a little bit more consistent to play around. Malzahar buffs I really personally don't like, because Malzahar used to be really broken before the set launch, like in the beta, in the PvE. So I'm always skeptical and scared because of the way Malzahar's ult works. Even if he dies, he still continues to do damage to enemies because the little voidlings run around. So this obviously scares me a little bit. That being said, it's a very small buff, so I don't think it's going to make him absolutely absurd broken, like crazy or really strong or anything like that. But it's just something to keep an eye out for, because at a certain point, if Malzahar does enough damage, he will be very problematic because of the way this ult works. In my opinion, I think it can be very frustrating to play around. He's like similar to like Singed in my opinion. Like there was a comp like, in PvE, it was like I think it's just because it was all the same comp, right? In PvE, you played Malzahar 2 carry with a Singed, and the two of them together were just like the most like toxic thing on the face of the earth, and it made the set really miserable to practice in beta. But you know, like I said, I'm just traumatized from stuff. If you didn't experience it, you're probably overjoyed, especially if you're a Malzahar enjoyer. So don't take my my battle-hardened depression seeing this guy be strong affect your judgment, right? This changes are good because he's not that good of a 3 cost right now. Then Zoe, getting a bit of buff. I felt like Zoe was pretty strong as an item holder. She does shred as well. These are pretty massive. It's like 10% or a little bit more in some cases. So that's pretty good. It could also help like some of the Targon boards. And I'm sure this set, this patch notes, we're probably going to see some Asol reworks because he's obviously dog shit and he has been for a while. So with some of the Targon units getting buffed, right? Tarek got buffed with his aura being good. Zoe's getting buffed. And now I see green text over here with Leona, right? It might make that whole Targon Asol line actually be something playable on the next patch. But here, strongest Leona grants your strongest Diana AP per second. So basically Diana starts scaling with increasing AP. I don't know how this interaction will work. I don't know if they're removing the Leona marking effect or if this is just an additive to the Leona marking effect as well. This seems pretty massive, right? Per second is pretty big. So if we look at this, I don't know why they're doing this, by the way. It's like we had like maybe 2 weeks where Diana wasn't railing my backline, and then all of a sudden we're giving like some massive buff to make Diana rail my backline again. Like I really hope they like nerf Fizz to the ground or something, because I can't deal with all these assassins. It's very hard to position and stuff. But you know, whatever, you could call it a skill issue, but just wait. When I look at this, it feels like it's a lot, right? Like let's think about an item in general, right? Archangels has scaling per time, right? So if you look at Archangels give 20 ability power every 5 seconds, right? So you're getting 20 ability power every 5 seconds. That means you're getting 4 ability power every second, right? If you divide it up. Now, 20 every 5 seconds means that you're basically getting nothing for the duration of 0 to 5. So the way I look at it is that, like, to me, this doesn't, like, you know, it doesn't necessarily pass the eye test really well, right? This seems like it's broken because, you know, a 2-star Leona basically gives a better Archangel's effect to Diana without giving the Diana an item. Just having the Leona exist. And Leona's already a tanky unit. And then if you have a 3-star Leona, it makes it even better. I feel like we're probably going to see, like, I know Diana's bad right now, but I would be shocked if they don't nerf Diana as well. So if we see a nerf later, that's why. So don't get alarmed if you see Diana nerfs in this presentation, because, like, this, to me, like, for just having the unit exist on the board, feels like it's a lot. I feel like it should be less than that. But of course, I might be wrong. Maybe it's perfectly balanced. Who knows? But I am very skeptical. I want to see some Diana nerfs to compensate. But anyways, Sejuani, the spell shield getting increased here feels kind of nutty because I feel like Sejuani is already one of the best 3-cost tanks. I feel like she's really absurdly strong and she's really annoying to deal with, and she has like a massive stun. So seeing these buffs, they're not that big, by the way, but they're still like, I just don't think she needed a buff. So, this one's a big question mark as well. I think these two, to me, like, obviously we have to rework something because Diana has to get reworked. But, especially this one, these are the ones where I start to get into the territory of, like, I don't know. I don't know about that. Next, let's go through 4 costs, excuse me. So, 4 costs, Braum. So Braum getting a mana reduction. The mana reduction is pretty massive. I think that Braum has a really good cast, right? He kind of blocks projectiles as well, so he can be abnormally tanky and really, really good in the front line. It's just that he feels a little bit awkward because he doesn't fit in really nicely to a lot of boards. And I feel like you really want to have Freljord in to scale his HP a lot. So he's a little bit dependent on having his traits in, which can make things a little bit awkward in how you can play him on different boards, at least as a primary tank. But I felt like he was okay in certain spots, so this I think just makes him a little bit more okay, or a little bit better. Next, let's go through Garen on the right side. So Garen, they're decreasing the spell heal. The spell heal, it's a pretty massive nerf, right? Not that massive, but it's like, you know, a little bit over 10% in terms of a nerf here. So this is just the healing aspect though. Garen still gets a lot of durability and armor and everything from Demacia, and we're not seeing any other Demacia nerfs or anything like that. So I don't think this alone is really going to make or break the Garen being strong or not. I think a Garen it might force you to have some better items on the Garen, right? You might need like the Spirit Visage or some sort of additional healing type of item on him, or maybe you need to have Gunblade with some of your other Demacian units, right? That's really common with this board as well. But in general, I don't think that's going to really alter the Demacian line. I think that still might even be the strongest line after the Bilgewater nerfs on the next patch. Next, we have Fizz. So, fixed a bug where Fizz targeting was inconsistent among backliners. I complained about this a lot. I said that it was really, really annoying. Basically, if you didn't know, Fizz he said like, hey, I target the furthest unit within 4 hexes. And, you know, sometimes he just didn't. Sometimes he just fucking didn't, man. And it was really annoying. It was like, it made him, in my opinion, made it worse than Diana. Because at least Diana was consistent. She wasn't bugged that she just hit random shit. Like this Fizz, like half the time you're just playing the game. And it's like, oh, I guess Fizz is there now. That's cool. I love that the game just doesn't do what it says it does. He just randomly, I guess, chooses somebody to target. So this bug was very annoying to me. So I'm really happy. This is a good change. Now, if you're a Fizz player, it might be a little bit harder for you to, you know, scam around and win the game because, you know, it's going to be consistent to play around. But at least now you can do stuff, right? Like, Fizz did not work with anti-Diana. They call it anti-Diana positioning, but basically like anti-assassin positioning didn't work on Fizz for this reason, which made it so unbelievably frustrating. Now you can probably anti-Fizz the Fizz, or like people call it anti-Diana. But if you don't know, I'll show you what I mean, right? When a unit targets the furthest within 4 hexes, there was certain positioning tricks you can do to avoid them going to your backline. This was namely one of the big ones, right? You would basically put a tank here. I'll put like star levels on them so you can see, and a tank here. And then if your unit tried to target your furthest positioning, right? If you put him here, 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 or here, he would walk up slightly and then would go to this side instead. Currently, if you tried to do anything like that, you just put the Fizz here and he just jumps here anyways. Even though he targets, you know, the farthest enemy within 4 hexes, he doesn't give a fuck. He would just target a unit that was closer just because, like, I guess I'll just target that unit. So hopefully that's fixed, right? Anyways, damage getting decreased, splash damage getting decreased. However, empowered attack damage is getting increased. I don't know if this is gonna make him do more or less damage. It's hard to say because this is like the spell AS. So he's just gonna attack more frequently, but I think he's gonna be less obnoxious. I think with the overall nerfs to the damage as well as the targeting is a big one. It's gonna be a lot easier to play around the Fizz in your lobby, which I think is gonna help and be more healthy for the game. Next we have Diana. So this is what I was expecting to see. I was expecting to see some red here, but basically, she had no mana lock. Now, shield and mana lock ends when Diana dash ends. So basically, like, I don't think she can gain mana when she's dashing or something like that. Basically, just to make it so she casts less frequently. So this might also alter the builds that you go on Diana as well. So we'll have to see. This with the Leona changes might change the way that we basically build Diana. She might not have the same build as she did in the previous patches, just because there's a lot of moving parts that got changed. Her spell shield getting increased, and then her target damage is getting decreased. This makes sense, right? You need to have some compensation because now she has that scaling aspect with the Leona. So a lot of the boards with Diana, you might actually end up playing Leona. Now, the thing is, in the past, you didn't play Leona with Diana because Leona would grief the Diana sometimes. So it's just a curious line. We don't know. I don't know. I cannot tell you guys with certainty exactly how this line's gonna play out because there's a lot of moving parts to it, right? Diana herself wasn't very good last patch. Now we have the Leona that scales her with AP, so we don't know exactly how strong that's gonna be. But one thing that's really important is that with Leona, if her passive is the same, or sorry, Diana's passive actually. Okay, so this will still exist. Leona wasn't very good with Diana because Diana has a passive that when Leona marks the enemies, then the Diana will dash to those enemies. With Diana, you cared more about the Diana jumping to the backline carry and killing the backline carry. When Leona is on the same board as Diana, it makes it a little bit awkward because what ends up happening is, I'm just using Singe as an example just for placeholders. When Leona marks a bunch of enemies, so let's say she marked all the Singes, Diana doesn't stay on the backline. She'll jump here, but then she'll also like jump to everybody and do like one instance of damage to everybody that's marked. And that made it so that she wasn't like focus firing down one unit, but instead she was like hitting like kind of like AoE across the entire board. What I mean to say by this is that now with the change to Leona that she scales the AP on Diana, I wouldn't be surprised if there was like some like really like crit build that you just played on Diana, that you did something like, you know, something like this instead of like scaling attack speed and you're just trying to one tap units, right? You just have her live for a really long time, maybe like double healing or some shit, right? Like I expect something like this maybe to be more apparent. We'll see. Like I said, that's what I mean by it's hard to tell because Diana was already really particular with items. So now with these changes, it's going to be a matter of like figuring out the exact particular set of items, which will happen in like a day or two of playing the new patch. So then we'll see how it works out. And then if there's not a particular set of items where she's good with, then she'll still be dog shit. But I think that with the Leona change, she'll probably be like a playable unit again, which I think is nice. Now we have Tarek. So instead of 90% durability over 2 seconds, he now heals for a certain amount over 2 seconds. I think the durability was stronger, so I don't know if this is a nerf or a buff, but to me it seems like a little bit weaker. It might be like contingent on like items and stuff like that now, so just keep that in mind, because before Tarek with the durability was really hard to kill. Now with the healing, I feel like if you have anti-heal, this is a lot easier to chew through, right? There's no anti-durability, right? I guess there is, but not easily, right? But if somebody has anti-heal, I feel like the new ability is like a strict nerf compared to the previous one. So Tarek might be a little bit less tanky, but obviously he got the buffs by other means, so we can talk. We already talked about that. And then Kai'Sa, this is what I was saying before, right? I expect to see some Kai'Sa nerfs. The nerfs aren't massive, but basically you're unlocking on level 7, so it makes sense. So this comp, now Void, might feel more of like a much more aggressive tempo line, as opposed to like a win out just with 6 Void, which is how it was already, but now it's just like more indexed into that play style, if that makes sense. This is both to AD and AP, getting nerfed a little bit. Oh boy, now we have some 5 costs to go through. So let's go through the 5 costs, everybody. Aatrox. So no longer scales with attack speed. I feel like some Aatrox builds usually built like Gwinsu or QSS for that reason. So that might change the way that we approach how Aatrox is built. We'll see. But he hasn't been getting that much play because he's just like a little bit of a weaker unit in general. And now he's getting a buff to his spell damage, which seems pretty massive. Not that massive, but it's definitely over like 10%, like or over that little threshold. When it's like a little bit more than 10%, that's when I start to say like that's a lot more impactful, if that makes sense. Next we have Galio. So Galio now is MR crash damage. I feel like they're splitting up his damage into 2 separate sections. So it's like armor versus the MR. So now he has armor scaling as well as MR scaling. I don't know if this makes him any better. I don't think this really matters that much. This seems like item dependent, but it's hard to say. But I think this just makes him more flexible. Like, I think if you put a TG on Galio, it'll be more effective. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Let's go to Mel. I know sometimes I go left to right and sometimes I go up and down, but it usually just comes down to how much text is here and what I see first. I'm sorry if I'm inconsistent. I'll try and be consistent in the future. But anyways, Mel, I have a pen, so I'm circling, so whatever. They're making it so she has more damage at 1 star. This can help to stabilize with some Noxus lines. I like this change. I think that Mel 1 felt really awkward. But I don't think in general Mel is going to be that crazy. Because with her current situation with mana generation, I feel like she just doesn't get her ult off early enough in the current state of the game. But we'll see how that goes. Annie, mana buff. Not too big of a mana change, so I don't think there's going to be too much of a difference, right? Getting to 170 versus 160, you know, it's around the same amount of time before the Annie first cast. Next we have Kindred. Instead of preventing from dying, now there's just a shield. This is a huge nerf. The preventing from dying would scam a lot of fights, and it made Kindred really good on a lot of different boards. As compensation, there's more passive damage, and the spell zone duration is getting increased. But personally, I think this is an overall nerf for Kindred. Because usually with Kindred, you don't even care too much about carrying Kindred in a lot of cases. It was just putting her on board to get Quick Striker, as well as getting this effect that can sometimes work really well on your board. So I'm not sure exactly where she's going to fall, but I think she'll still make it on boards as like a good +1 late game, just for Quick Striker in general. Next we have Shyvana. So now Shyvana's passive is getting reduced by 2%. So this is the one where she reduces ability damage. We just talked about this. It's going to last even if she dies. So I think 1-star Shyvana a little bit better, 2-star Shyvana a little bit worse. Mana buff, so she's going to cast a little bit faster. Spell duration a little bit lower, so she might do some less damage, but she's getting compensated by some increase in these numbers over here, right? So I think in general, it's going to be less overall damage, right? Because this number doesn't increase by the same ratio as that number, but it's fine. I think Shyvana fits in a nice role of just landing on the board and having like a passive buff, and the passive buff is still there, so I think it's fine. T-Hex, they're giving him a shit ton of armor and a shit ton of more base AD. This might mean that T-Hex is back. I'm not sure how back T-Hex will be, but I don't think you're going to be playing with reroll, obviously, because like the build will probably be different, because you might have to build mana on it, because you won't be going for like 3-star Caitlyn or anything like that. But this is pretty massive. 10 armor and MR is a really, really big change to make this unit a lot more tanky. And then additionally, I talked about like 5 AD is like good versus bad. This is 10 AD, right? I think that if you unlock T-Hex, this unit will hit like a fucking truck, even with the previous nerfs. The problem is just getting to T-Hex. So if there is a line that very easily unlocks T-Hex, or very easily can get the T-Hex on the field, then I think this will be very, 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 very scary. But if it's only situational to having like a specific Piltover board, then obviously that might be a little bit different. Alright, like obviously I don't think it's going to be like Caitlyn reroll into T-Hex like it was in the past, because you don't get the benefit and stability from the Caitlyn hitting everything. But these changes are pretty big, right? Especially if you add in some like extra Piltover survivability synergies. I think that the T-Hex will be a reliable late game carry at least. I think he's back to being like a playable unit. It just depends on how easy it is to get him out and to get to that massive point. Like I expect it to be more of like a unlock TX on level 9 and cap out with T-Hex Senna like type of beat, not like hit him on stage 3 and try and get to level 9 fast 9 off of him. You know what I mean? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Hopefully that makes sense. Ziggs, passive damage getting like nuked here a little bit. Not too much of a change though, right? It's like around 10%. I still think Ziggs is gonna be really strong. I think this is like a slap on the wrist compared to how strong Ziggs was on the current patch. So we'll see how that goes. Silas, you know, I'm not gonna talk about Silas. Every time I talk about Silas, people get upset because I don't know, they must jerk off him or something. But 10 armor and magic resist. This is really massive. I think this helps out Silas quite a bit. One of Silas' biggest problems is that he would just int and die very fast, so it made him really hard to play around, especially for the cost of 7 gold. So having 10 extra armor, pretty important. I think this can make him a really big nuisance, and it can also make him a really viable option if you're trying to cap out your board around him. I still think he's going to be hard to play around, unless you really have a situation or board that you can cap with him pretty nicely and you have good items for him. But this definitely helps with his survivability, and I think that was one of his biggest issues. If there's ever a point in time where Silas is consistent enough with his chain breaker, and that you don't need to give him a survivability item in order for him to, like, you know, be a primary carry, I think that that will help out a lot, and this puts him closer to that step. So we'll see if he's broken or not. But this is a massive buff, because this is, I think, what he needs maybe the most is like survivability, and I think that's one of the things that helps him a lot with the consistency. So I like these changes a lot. Next we have Thresh. So Thresh now, I think his scaling for Shadow Isles is getting massively increased, right? Instead of 1 per 20, it's 1 per 15. This is the Shadow Isles Boko dollars, and he's getting more passive healing. So as a frontline unit, that helps out quite a bit. This is a huge buff to Shadow Isles, and it also, as we talked about in the beginning of the patch notes, Shadow Isles is going to be a lot more accessible because now you only need one item on the Viego. So there's going to be more situations where you can easily lean into Shadow Isles, and I think Kallista's a great carry. And if you get Thresh, this might help with the Thresh consistency as well as your late game cap around the Thresh. So these are nice things to see. In general, I feel like a lot of the 5-cost changes pretty on par, pretty good, right? I think just in general, making everything a little bit closer. So that everybody can kind of like behave a little bit more in line with each other and in line with their costs. Senna Lucian. Black Mist removed. Okay, as I was saying that, I think this really hurts Senna Lucian. Oh god. I think this is the shielding, right? She doesn't shield anymore? That's like half the fucking reason you play this unit. Holy. And you're increasing the damage, and now it does 8% less damage for each target hit. So how much of a damage increase is this on 1-star Senna? So now Senna's a carry. They're trying to make Lucian Senna a carry instead of a support unit. And then Soulbound only exists when they're alive, so they don't get the same buff as Tarek and Skarner and Shyvana. I don't know how I feel about this. I guess it's fine. Like, an AD carry late game is okay. It's not a bad thing. I just feel like Senna Lucian is just like, was one of the trifecta of flex play. You know what I mean? Like, whenever you think about flexible units, like, it's like you always play Shyvana, you always play Fiddlestick, you always play Senna Lucian. Now, I feel like without the shielding, that is a pretty massive nerf to this unit. I expect to see this unit a lot less on boards, is what I will say. Now, is the damage enough that you play Senna as like a late game cap? Like, maybe. But I'm not sure. Because, like, the problem is you switch to Lucian, right? Like this only happens half the time. So it's not that much of a buff to compensate for this. All I can say is we'll see. But this is pretty impactful, right? Random Senna on your board is not going to be as... like, you still... By the way, I want to make it clear. You still get the durability and damage amp, so she'll still be on board. She'll still be good. She just won't be as impactful. So there might be, like, a situation where you have to choose whether or not to play the unit, which I think is, you know, I think that's fine. Whatever. Maybe it's fine. Aurelian Soul. This one's going to be a big one. So mana buff, of course. Spell damage buff, of course. Shockwave damage, of course. Now, this is the big one. This is a complete rework, and it's hard to say exactly how this is gonna go. Because basically, when Aurelian Soul damages with the ability, now it's getting changed that you get the Stardust per damage. Every 250 ability damage that you deal. This means that Aurelian Soul is not going to be like a casting bot. You still want to cast a bunch, which he might still be a casting bot to proc this, but damage items are also going to make sense on the unit. So the exact way that you build the Aurelian Soul to optimize for this is really going to change exactly how you play the unit. Because as it is right now, right, if we look at Aurelian Soul, this unit kind of blows. It just sucks because it's hard to unlock, and then it takes a while to scale, because like the whole thing with Aurelian Soul is that he has to scale. So now the scaling is completely changed so that it doesn't work on doing ability damage to an enemy and gaining Stardust. Instead, it is doing damage to the enemy. So before, all you cared about was just casting. So like the best Aurelian Soul builds was some bullshit like this, or like other variations of this, like you can go blue buff adaptive, stuff like that. But it's basically like, I just want to chain cast. I want to have attacks granting mana. I want to boost my attack speed. I want him to cast like 100 times in a fight, so he just keeps doing ability damage and he keeps scaling it. Now, you have to do a certain amount of damage to gain the Stardust. Additionally, the Starforger bonus is getting decreased. Overall, like, if you squint, it looks a little bit like he got nerfed overall, but I think their front loading is damaged. They're making him stronger out the gate, and they're also changing the thresholds for the Stardust. So it's going to come down to how the itemizations change, right? If you itemize him more for damage, he might be like an Archangel's Demon, right? Like, because the Archangels is a tier item and a damage item, so it helps him to cast and it helps him to like do well. I expect Archangels maybe to be good on him. Maybe like with Seraph Staff, like double Archangel builds might be really strong, because that way he gets like an increased amount of casting and he does a lot of damage, which means that he will also earn that Stardust a lot more efficiently, right? The 250 Stardust, right, before, like, I want to make it clear, right, it was like 1 per enemy damage. Now it's per 250 ability damage. So before, when he would cast, like, if there were 8 units on the board, he would gain like 8 Stardust. Now he can gain significantly more than that, because like, what I'm trying to say is, if you drop a nuke on the board, that's why the items I think have to change. If you do like 10,000 damage, divide that by 250, that's how much Stardust you're gaining. So that, with the changes to the thresholds of the Stardust, which we don't know how they're going to look, is going to come down to figuring out the items for him, which, like I said, will take time, because he's so trash right now. We can't just like pull it out of our bum and say, oh, these are the best items. That's I'm not trying to clickbait you guys. I'll let you guys know once I figure it out. It'll probably take me a day or two after the patch happens, because I'll need to like see it in real life just to like have a better understanding. But I do expect him to be playable. That's the one thing I will say. With this amount of changes, this amount of a rework, it would be a damn shame if he was still dog shit. So I expect him to be usable. So look forward to that if you're an ASOL enjoyer. Desert. So this is Xerath. I think it's just some charm changes. So like, you know, the golem getting some less, and now it's going to 2 golems. So I think, or sorry, costing more and being 2 golems and getting weaker. Sure. Xerath mana gen on this one. Rite of Negation. Giving damage, I'm sure, and Sacrificial Guard removed. I don't even know which one is, but it's just some charm adjustments. I'm assuming it's fine. We won't worry too much about it. Next, we're getting towards the end of this. Items and artifacts. So Edge of Night now heals for 30% of the missing health. I think it's a massive buff. 30% of the missing health plus the invulnerability. This might make it really common on some melee units, and it might also take the place of some healing on some Slayer units and stuff like that, because this is pretty big. 30% missing health, that is an insane amount of missing health on like high cost units especially. So I expect Edge of Night to be a lot better of an item. This looks borderline broken to me, but I'm not 100% sure, because it's just like, it comes down to like needing the effect to proc, you know what I mean? We'll see for sure. Gnasher's Tooth giving more AP, I think is sure okay. I feel like the item is already really good, but whatever. Darkened Scythe now giving HP, and it gives less AP, so it makes it more of like a ADs type of unit. I think this is just a straight buff, because you usually just put on AD units anyways, so sure. Dawn Core, more AD AP, okay, sure. Flicker Blades, AS per attack is now 6%. We're getting to that territory where it's back to what it was when it was broken almost. So I expect this to be really strong. So I don't know why it's getting buffed, but whatever. Gambler's Blade, increased gold chance, sure. Indomitable, more max HP. Sniper Focus, more AD AP. I feel like all of these artifacts were pretty strong anyways. So like, I don't know why they're getting buffed, but maybe they weren't strong. So my bad if I misread that. So sure. Augments now. So, new Cosmic Calling. Gain a Spear of Shojin, a Leona, and on 3/7, gain a Taric. Is 3/7 early enough? Okay, depending on how broken ASOL is, there's a good chance this is like fucking absurdly broken. Guaranteeing a Taric on 3/7, you can unlock the Diana before then, which means that on 4/1 you're starting with ASOL. I don't know if that's soon enough, right? It comes down to the ASOL himself, but like, this seems a little bit annoying of an item, at least to me. So I don't know. It just comes down to ASOL, right? If ASOL is broken, this is broken. Because like, getting the Taric is good though, so it's not even that bad. It's just like, but a lot of this power is obviously for like ASOL. But if I can see this being broken if Diana is broken. Remember we were talking about Diana changes? Because if you can unlock Diana and have the Leona early, this can actually work really well. And this is on 3/2 as 3/2 only. So 3-2 is not that bad, right? If this was on 2-2, you can make a argument that it's like, you know, there's arguments on how good it is. But 3-2, you only have to sack 5 rounds to get the Tarek. So a lot of times if you see this and you already have a Leona, maybe you're already trying to angle Diana, this gives you the Leona, right? Like, it can often, it can probably complete you, right? If this Leona pairs you, for example, I see this as being pretty good, because you get Leona pair, you get Diana, you win the rounds anyways, 3-7, you get a Tarek. Even if you're not playing Asol, you kind of have your whole board set up for a gold augment, and it still gives you a Spear of Shojin, it gives you an item, so it's not that bad, right? Even if you're not playing towards like a specific win condition, it still feels like, you know, in certain spots, just because it gives you a Leona, it can actually be really good. That's what I see here. This one, gain 50 XP growth mindset. Yeah, that one was kind of annoying. This is like the prismatic one, and then you would just go fast 10. Makes it a little bit more balanced in my opinion. Aura farming. Chap now holds 1 recommended items, but it goes to 4-5. I hate this augment, and they keep like swapping it from 4-3 to 4-5 to 4-3 to 4-5. Item yes, item no, item 2, item 1. Listen, this augment, in order for it to be really good, needs to be 4-3 with 1 item. When it was 4-3 with 1 item, it was good and it wasn't broken, in my opinion at least. Being 4-5 with 1 item, I do not think is good. I think 4-5 is too late. You're basically playing down a gold augment until 4-5. Of course, if you're in a lobby where nobody is punishing you, then this is really good because you get a 2-star 5 cost at 4-5. But I personally wouldn't click this with these changes. I didn't click it before these changes, by the way, when it was 4-3 no item. I still think this is too far away. I think it's a little bit better than 4-3 no item, right? Potentially, because you have the 1 item, so it gives you a little bit more value. But 4-5 I think is way too late. You can be dead by then, especially if you don't have a good mid game. Bringer of Ruin getting nerfed. I felt like this augment wasn't even that crazy strong when I played it. It does have the potential to be insanely strong. It's just that it really depends on you high rolling some of your upgrades and getting like a really strong board. And Swain is really contested, which makes Bringer of Ruin a little bit awkward in my opinion. But making it less AP, it's getting nerfed. This is a pretty massive nerf to it. So I'm assuming it must be really, really broken at certain levels of play. But at least to me, it doesn't feel that strong. So I don't know. I would probably avoid it now. I kind of liked it last patch, but I think this patch, I think that's pretty massive of a nerf in my opinion. For what it was at least. Call to Chaos. Melee carry Golem. Reward remove. Yeah, this one sucked. Thank God. And then Golden Egg item anvils drops from 2 to 1. So this one's a little bit more risky. This one was really good because it gave you 2 item anvils. Now with only 1 item anvil, it's a lot worse. Chosen Wolves, this augment was dog shit. You can actually see it in the stats because it counts as a trait. It's like one of the worst things in the game. So this is Kindred and Bessa dual carry. They're increasing it, just buffing it straight up. It needs a buff. It was really bad. It looks like borderline bugged. I wouldn't be surprised if even with these buffs, it's still shit. So we'll see. Component heist being 4 turns is actually pretty nice. I like this change. It might make it useful. 5 turns felt way too long. 4 turns, if you're sacking the rounds anyways. This basically gives you 1 of every component, which is pretty valuable for a prismatic. So I like this a lot. But I don't know if it's good or not. It'll be spot dependent, but 4 is definitely a good change. Crash Test Dummies, more stun, cool. Demacia Forever, less HP, makes sense. This one's really strong and Demacia is really strong, so without Demacia changes, I can see this one getting rid of that win condition a little bit sooner. Dragon Guards, Jarvan, armor, magic resist damage getting decreased. I think that makes sense because he's just like really, really strong in this Dragon Guard setup, even after nerfs, so makes sense. Exiles, the shield getting nerfed. Exiles is one of the best augments in the game in my opinion, so it makes sense. But sad for me because I really like the augment. Going long, XP per round now getting dropped from 5 to 4. And then initial gold getting increased to 15. I don't like this that much. I don't know if it's broken or not. I feel like this hurts the augment. It makes your early game a little bit easier, but it makes your late game a little bit harder. So it turns it more into like a tempo level 8 type of augment, I guess. Golden Egg fixed to grant Indomitable, sure. Then Hard Commit giving you extra gold. I kind of like Hard Commit with all the emblem changes now, so this makes it a little bit better of an augment in my opinion. So that's cool. Oops. Come on. Augments 2 of 2. Hustler no longer grants 2 XP at the start and gives you 2 to 3 gold. So this is what it was. Is this not what it was when it was dog shit? Doesn't this just make Hustler bad now? I felt like Hustler was one of the better econ augments on the current set. I feel like this makes it bad now. I'll have to see it in life, like I'll have to try it out in a game to kind of see like how much this early gold versus the gold that you get here makes it work. But when Hustler was, I think in past sets, Hustler was 3 gold and it wasn't particularly good. It was pretty awkward to play around. So in my opinion, I think it's going to be not very good, but we'll see. Because right now it is very good with the 2 XP and the 2 gold. Obviously, because 4 gold per round, it's like almost a prismatic level of combat. Or sorry, a prismatic level of econ. I just don't know. Because the starting gold makes it so you have like a little bit better of an early game, right? When you have more starting gold with these augments, you can just push the levels instantly because you don't get interest, right? So you just push the levels instantly. You're level 5, level 6. You win streak on stage 2, stage 3. Then you use the streaking gold to help you to get to level 8 and then eventually cap out later. I just don't know how this is going to work out. Know your enemy. Decrease in damage amp. This was a very strong augment in my opinion. So, you know, sad to see, but sure. Para 4 is removed. I never clicked at this set, so it makes sense. I think it's just too hard to get there. Precision and Grace no longer dash at the start of combat. Okay. I think this made positioning, this was the reason with certain units, you would have like buggy interactions, right? So this actually helps out quite a bit. So this is nice. Like basically because they would dash at the start, they would like grief themselves and like get targeted in an awkward spot. Preparation, increasing the stats is pretty massive because you get this 4 times, right? You get this like stacked for all your preparation stacks. I find that I don't play this augment that much this set because even though it gives a lot of stats, I'm usually trying to flex around different units a little bit more because that's just the way the set is and unlocks and all of that. So it's really hard to get the preparation stacks on the unit, but I can see this being really strong on like boards that you know that you're playing all the time, like Demacia, for example, that you have your units on your bench and you know that you're going to play them no matter what. But other than that, it could be, I feel like it's a little bit harder to put in. Slice of Life. So changing the cost of the units now is 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5. So you're getting 1 less 4 cost and 2 less 3 cost. I think this is a pretty big nerf, but this augment was broken, so we'll see. Spreading Roots, less gold. Sweet Treats, less HP. Makes sense. These ones were really strong. Trait Tree, less gold. Trait Tree plus less gold. A little bit scary because the gold was a really big part of these being broken, but emblems are really strong, so we'll see. And we haven't seen any emblem changes, so I think that's still fine. Wild Growth, sure. World Runes temporarily removed. Makes sense. This augment is like an instant win or giga broken if you're really good at the game, and otherwise it's very hard to play around. But with the emblem changes, this augment is very, very difficult to play around. Deal with. It's really strong because the emblem changes, they basically got all buffed, and this is something that gives you an infinite amount of emblems. It's like insanely broken. It's like an instant click if you know what you're doing. So that's really scary. So removed makes sense. They'll probably try and make it like a little bit more accessible for all the ranks. So it's not just like a skillful, how do I phrase it? It's not just like if you know how to play around it and you're really comfortable with the units, it's broken, and otherwise it was really bad, because that makes for a bad augment, right? If you could only play it if you have a certain skill level, then it's not fun for majority of the players. And then Worth the Wait, delayed turns now 0. I think it's a big change because now you can hit your 3-star a lot faster. I usually like to play around Worth the Wait in the past. I feel like it's just a nice way to just like call it a day, get a top 4 and get out and play around some units and just like, you know, play for tempo. They nerfed it because of previous set with the fruit interaction and all of that shit. It was just broken, so it became like a really, really bad augment because you had to wait 2 turns in order to start getting the copies of the unit. Now it's delayed to 0. Basically, you can click this and you'll have your 3-star unit usually at the start of the next stage. Which makes it so that your stage 2 is usually strong, and then your stage 3 is usually strong, and then you can just use that 3-star to try and build around into a 4-cost board or 5-cost board, which I like. Next we have some bug fixes. Darius. Oh, yay. So Darius no longer mana locked. I talked about Darius being a little bit awkward to play around because he kind of fucking sucked and sometimes just didn't do anything. This is why. I found out about the mana lock issue a little bit later. I just knew that he sometimes just stopped working, and I was like, okay, I guess this unit is just bugged. He just doesn't function correctly. This might make the Noxus line a lot better because Darius getting his ults off could actually help a lot, especially with Draven, because Draven's adoration stacks also proc with Darius. So like making him not mana locked, this might be a massive buff, right? It might actually make this line a lot better, because before he was just useless. He was just a target dummy. Band of Thieves 2 are now mutually exclusive. Okay, makes sense. Galio no longer interacts unintentionally with other systems. Don't know what they're talking about, but sure. Bilgewater items no longer interact unintentionally with other systems. I think this one is talking about there was a way that you would get duplicate Bilgewater items. And it was like a bug that was like very rare, but I think it had to deal with like Gwen encounter. So I think that's what that's referring to, but maybe not. We'll see. 1, 2s, 3s no longer dance additional 1-cost champion. I didn't even know this happened. I took this augment a couple of times. I literally just wasn't paying attention, I guess. Tom Kenshin no longer spells spatulas and frying pans. I did not know this was a bug. I thought this was intentional. So this is, it's not that big of a nerf because it was really rare when it happened. But like so many times I saw people hit like 10 Bilgewater because of this bullshit. Like my god. Units no longer, you lose durability from Big Friend if they separate. Yes, I know about this bug. I remembered about this bug, but I never remember to mention it to you guys because it's just an augment I always skip. So I always forget to say. But yes, this augment was really bad because of that. Like basically, it had the same bug as like the socialite hexes in the previous set, where like you would have it at the start of the fight, but then as soon as you moved away, you would lose the benefits. Then void mutation no longer persists in higher tiers when dropping to lower tiers. Yes, this was a problem. If you didn't know, if you like randomly removed a tier and sometimes the void item would get stuck on that unit and you have to re-put in the high tier void and physically remove the void item from the unit, or else you wouldn't be able to put a new mutation on them. So this is a nice change. I like that. Well, obviously it's a bug fix, but you know what I mean. It's a good bug fix. All right. That's the whole patch. Took a while. We went through everything in detail. Overall things that I want to point out. Things that you'll see a large change on. I think that Targons obviously will have a little bit of a shift to them. I think Bilgewater with the nerfs will be a little bit more tame. It might even be in the tier of situational, right? Depending on how the serpents work out, right? I probably have to play it at least once to see, because like there's a tempo associated with Bilgewater. We're trying to tempo your lobby really hard, so that might make some really nice changes. And obviously the Fizz nerfs makes it really easy, a lot easier to play around those particular variations. Then of course Demacia basically got untouched here, and Demacia in my opinion is one of the better lines and one of the good default lines you can play on the current patch. Void I think is going to be really good for tempo as well. So these are the two that I think are going to be the main head runners. Obviously, we'll see how the patch kind of comes up. Targon is a question mark because we have to see how Diana is built and how Asol is built. And if those work out, then it will be really strong. And then Bilgewater is a little bit of a question mark as well because of how strong it is right now, exactly how it's going to end up later. That's like my overall read of just in general. Everything else I think is going to be relatively similar, relatively the same, because a lot of it is just adjusting like costs of units and stuff. Or sorry, some of the smaller abilities with units and some of their interactions with other things. But overall, looks like a good patch. Seems to address a lot of the bigger issues, and hopefully everything kind of pans out and does well. Oh, the other one is T-Hex. T-Hex is another question mark. I felt like the T-Hex buffs were pretty massive. So T-Hex is another question mark. But we'll see how those ones work out. When the patch drops, I will play, obviously. And when I play, I will also look up some information for you guys. And I will give you guys the best comps recommendation. That's going to happen later in the week. So stay tuned for that. I'll let you guys know when the patch drops, what I think are the better comps for climbing based on my own experiences, and having a little bit more of a understanding. But this is just to overview everything for right now. Make sure to like and subscribe. Of course, if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe to Mort Dog as well. I'm reacting to his video. You can also check out the original one and see some of their reasoning and decisions and how they think the game's going to be impacted. Additionally, if you want, you can sign up for memberships on my channel. If you sign up for coaching on my channel, you know, we're getting towards the end of the, not towards the end of the set, we're getting towards the middle of the set. I still have around half of the keychains I made. I have some handmade Poro keychains and some card bundles. You get one for free if you sign up for coaching, which is the prismatic tier of memberships. You can also sign up for cheaper memberships if you just want to support me for some members only content. You can sign up for silver, and then you can also sign up for gold memberships if you want me just to VOD review your content similar to what I do on my VOD channel. But anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great day and see ya. Bye bye.